Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's 79 degrees. This is the Thomas Jefferson part of our walk. And the wind is like 1 mile an hour. It's very still. The sun is still out. And people are probably trying to drive home from beaches and so forth, having celebrated Memorial Day. It's a special day, and I think it's an important time for us to think about some of the things that occur in war. Everybody always thinks that the Second World War was the iconic war. Good reason, horrible enemies, right on our side, and so forth. And Hitler made all of that possible, and with the most unimaginable acts that helped define war crimes. But we all helped define war crimes in World War II, because it was certainly the first war with such expansion that citizens were brought into it, men, women, and children. And one of the things that anybody who writes about war finds is that while it may not be always true, war begins with a lie. We say, remember the Maine, as if the Spanish were responsible for what happened to the Maine, when that's not what happened at all. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution in the Vietnam War, in which it was claimed that we were in international water when we were not. We were in the waters of Vietnam. In Iraq, we had claims among some of the people that we regarded very highly, Colin Powell at the UN, telling us there were weapons of mass destruction, and that's why we had to go into Iraq, not Afghanistan, where we thought the principles for 9/11 were to be found, or any place else. And some marked that off to the ambitions barely concealed by Bush W., Bush the Younger, to, in a way, get credit for those who had threatened, in his mind, his dad. The background to this is different. That is to say, the background to what happened between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. It's different because it appears that each side has attacked. And as far as we can tell, Hamas took and drew the first blood, killing men, women, and children, violating the war's rules about engagement, if you can ever have rules when you're talking about a war. But the notion of innocents, non-combatants, are not part of the war is a standard that is accepted in sufferance, not embraced. And we've had other incidents besides what Israel has done. And we can't ignore the fact that yesterday, despite efforts by the International Court, Netanyahu went into the area, Rafah, and 45 people were killed, including 2 officers, they claim, in the Hamas leadership. But men, women, and children were killed, and 1 child was identified because of the circumstances of his apparent death. He had been beheaded. Netanyahu told his parliament that it was an accident. We planned it. That wasn't supposed to happen. As much as I would like to believe an innocent explanation, an updated view of collateral damage, I can't. Nor does it help us have a clear view of how these players are playing fast and loose when, before Israel struck into Rafah. The Hamas had attacked apparently into Tel Aviv without really scoring anything. We're in a very difficult place. What we find ourselves is that the outbreak of hostilities is usually the end of truth. War begins in a lie. And we rely on the fog of war to conceal the clarity of the hidden agenda that dictates a war that doesn't make any sense to all of us, when only peace makes sense, because this tinderbox in the Middle East, should it erupt as it appears prepared to do, given the tensions in the geography around these two states, Palestine and Israel, is the kind of thing that maybe it's not the Archduke Ferdinand, but maybe it's also a lot more serious, could lead to a world war. And we feel and smell the war in the world as people do things in violation of common sense, humanity, international law, their constitution, rules. And we, the United States, have become somewhat complicit. And so we look to see how Biden will handle this. And Trump is doubling down on Palestinian demonstrations, protesters saying they should be punished and they should be deported. And that's what he would do if he were president, if he becomes president again. I had some experience with the debate grounded in language to incite people to action. And the language is, when you say Palestinian, there are those who would attach terrorists to that word. And the reason is to justify by words a thought that then dwells within us, and if become ordinary to our discussion, has us say, of course that's what they would do, and of course we must respond. Now, the instance where I found this debate of use is at Fox. I had never been on the Sean Hannity show, but I was called and invited because I think of some things I was saying at the time. And they were going to have a special. And Hannity and company said I could bring my wife, stay at a hotel, they would feed us, and we were going to tape, I don't know if it was a 2-hour show, and we were going to have 4 people on each side of the question having to do with how do we deal with terrorists. And during the course of this show, in the first segment, Sean Hannity, who emceed or hosted the debate by walking back and forth before us, wasn't menacing or anything. I think it worked. I think it was a good way to focus. It was a good way to make the contact. Now, I was sitting next to a former ambassador and 2 other people, all of whom agreed. And Hannity, I don't know if he thought I was an easy mark, but he kept saying, so, why won't you say Islamic terrorists? And I said, because not all of Islam is engaged in terrorism. It is not a character of the people, and I don't agree that it's a fair or right discussion to do that. And he kept going at me in various ways, and I, not being a retiring fellow, was persistent, as was he. And then there was a break. And then during the break, and I carry this as a red badge of courage, he said, you're a lunatic with a bow tie. And he was smiling when he said it. I don't mean to say he was crazy, but it shows the distance in his at least apparent belief. And there are those in our country who want us to turn against, say, the head of Hamas, presuming everybody else who is Muslim and Arab is the same. And that's not the case. And it's certainly not the case with non-combatants, women and children. We're not talking sympathy or what their deepest thoughts may be. And it's not the kind of thing that we should have a world war about. So we have this situation which is very difficult. It becomes more difficult every day that we travel away from whatever values we hold dear that should be applied instead of brute force. There's an old Irish curse that the Irish dream things the world has never seen. But in my view, it's exactly because the Irish, and not them alone, dream things and believe in them and try to make a change that things do happen. And that's what we have here. Except we appear to have leadership in our country, indeed in both parties, who are prepared to be complicit in what Israel is doing without, if you will, declaring a plague on both houses for the misconduct on both sides. So what we get when truth and law are of no consequence is we only have bullying strength. What I, Netanyahu, the head of Hamas, can get away with. And if America's voice means anything, it should be exercised. It should be out there. France President Macron, he has opposed the conduct of Netanyahu. Netanyahu has trouble in his own parliament for what he's doing. The question on this day in which we're thinking about those who give their service and their life in defense of this country and its freedoms, it begs the question. The question being how one may die in service to a lie by the government. When it was clear that McNamara had lied about what was going on in Vietnam, and people were dying in his theory of we could afford to have people die, but they would die in greater numbers than we did, a war of attrition. And it turned out the numbers didn't work out that way. And we were the ones suffering. But the world didn't know it until his book came out. And I was so angry at this worthless piece of shit that I wouldn't buy the book, but I wanted to read it so I could discuss it. And I sat in a bookstore with my skilled Evelyn Wood speed reading talents, and I read the book. And I thought less of him. And we've seen it. People write books telling us things they should have told us at the time, and that they didn't. And we find ourselves today looking for guidance. And we have the guidance. The International Court is a direct descendant after World War II of the Nuremberg trials that were not without their difficulties. The biggest objection was, were we trying people for crimes after the fact, defined after the fact, or did we know what they were? Justice Jackson from the Supreme Court went over for the trials. Others did. A partner at the law firm where I worked in New York, he clerked for Jackson while Jackson had this assignment and said he didn't see him very much because of the Nuremberg assignment. So what is our path out of this? We have a clear path. What we have to do is follow the facts where they go, to be true to those facts, to exercise our power with Netanyahu and the Israeli parliament and with the Palestinians, and have the allies and friends of Hamas and the Palestinians push this toward a ceasefire and put in place safeguards to punish, up to and including jailing, those people involved in these war crimes. In fact, the International Criminal Court has done exactly that by issuing arrest warrants that I think still remain to be approved by the court. So as I think about my uncle, who had damage in World War II, the iconic Good War, and how he suffered because the government didn't, in my family's understanding, take care of him for what he had done for his country. My dad felt the same way. And it was the only time I remember hearing my mother cry, when she found out her brother-in-law, Charlie, had died. It was the keening like the Irish do. It was how we suffer loss. And when people at distant places make decisions that cause death and destruction for power advantages and for no good reason, or because you're a different religion. Are we playing out in modern times the Crusades again? Which is why Jefferson and others did not see how theocracies profited governments or humankind. So I'm out here on the trails today, and these are obviously serious thoughts, and they fold nicely into tomorrow, when a former president of the United States will sit and listen to 12 men and women decide whether or not he committed the crimes he did, and punish him, hopefully, for what he's done. And if that happens, we're on a road back toward a government that cares about truth and cares about the law. If not, we're in for extra innings. But like I said, the Irish dream things the world has never seen. We've never seen a case like this. And no one has seen an outcome like we hope comes to pass. So I say goodbye to you from our Cathedral of Trees until tomorrow.